Whoa, I've got the audio playing in the background. Sorry about that. What's up, desktopers? Xavier Wills here for Desktop Bodybuilding, and we are back for another Daily Bodybuilding News Live. And we are here today with Bob Cicherillo, MC of Mr. Olympia, IFBB Pro, accomplished dude in the sport. Bob, how you doing?
Good, man. How's it going?
Yeah, it's good. It's good. You just got back from FIBO. You were just saying just before we started, and it looked pretty crazy out there. And it seems like I didn't think by this stage we'd have expos back to where they seem to be already. But how was it compared to, I suppose, past years?
From what I've heard, I haven't been back there since it was in Essen. That was probably, geez, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago or something like that. But from what I've heard, this year was back to specs. And also from what I understand, they actually sold out tickets, general admission tickets, which has never been done before. So good for the expo, the sport itself, the expo, and of course the organizers. But it was jammed up, man. There was people from all over the place.
Yeah. Are people getting sick coming out of that? Because I know, like, when people say they go to the Arnold weekends and stuff, they always come back sick.
Well, didn't do DJ any favors. He's still in
Oh, no.
Germany with pneumonia, so I don't know if that's
Oof.
from there or if it's something he had before he went there. But he ended up in the hospital. I just talked to him the other day, and he seems to be doing much better. But he's actually from Germany. He grew up in Germany, so at least he's in an area he's familiar with. He's got family out there still.
Yeah, for sure. I'm actually trying to share my screen. I'm doing it through Firefox at the moment. I want. Okay, so hopefully, I don't know
You hit the
if
wrong button. What the hell are you doing over there?
yeah, that was my internet connection. I mentioned that to you earlier, but I've connected to my phone's internet now, so fingers crossed. This
There we
was
go.
very good, and later on I'll cut that
Don't hit
portion
the
out.
don't
But
hit the button on the right.
yeah, I was sweating then. I was like, this is not going to work. But we're back, we're back. But Bob, there was something actually I wanted to talk about, and a lot of the time I know you have ideas. You're the athletes rep, and you float these ideas with the IFB and the powers that be. And I sort of want to raise a question: if we were sort of in the position maybe of a Jake Wood, who obviously is financially very stable, the IFB Pro League, I don't know what their financial situation is, but obviously it's the premier
Mhm.
federation in the world. But if
Right.
you had $100 million and you were just passionate about bodybuilding, you had to put it into bodybuilding, and you sort of ran the federation and ran, I suppose, the Mr. Olympia and all that sort of stuff, how would you divvy up that money? Because there's a lot of spots where it could go, but to make bodybuilding better and bigger, I mean, I have my own ideas, but I'd like to know what you would do if you were in that sort of position.
All right. So the hypothetical is that we have a $100 million to spread around. Is that right, my friend?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Well, I mean, listen, with that kind of money, you can do a whole bunch of things, right? First thing I would do is I would actually put athletes under contract, most like a more like a regular pro sports team. I know we're not quite a sport in the traditional sense, but the same type of thing where I would have competitions and such, but there hypothetically there wouldn't be any prize money per se. People would be under contract. You would get paid whatever monthly, and decent contracts too. But the entire process would play out more like again, wrestling, a sporting event, baseball, football, whatever. There would be a weekly program, TV, that type of thing, where you can actually follow the bouncing ball. Shows would be more regularly scheduled, so you'd have to get advertisers on things like that, of course. But one of the biggest problems with bodybuilding is that it's very difficult to follow because shows only happen every once in a while. I mean, we're still talking about the Arnold, for God's
Mm.
sakes, when we're a couple of months into the year already. But much like I was watching my New York Yankees playing earlier, tomorrow there's another game, or on the weekend, or whatnot. You can follow a sport progressively till you get to the end game, which is the World Series, the Super Bowl, the World Championships, whatever that sport might dictate. So with that type of money, you can do a whole bunch of things, increase the entertainment value. Um, I would have more, prejudgings would still be traditionally what they are. I would have more shows rather than competitions at the nighttime finals.
Yep. So, one thing we have actually a pretty heavy part of a schedule coming up. I counted up. I mean, this is when Puerto Rico, which just came out yesterday, that's been cancelled. But there was like 12 shows in 13 weekends or something like that, open shows around the world, some in the US, some overseas in Europe. Which I was
Great.
like, wow, I'm excited for that, and I am excited for that for sure. But it just seems like the start of a season. There's such a, you got the Arnold. you got how many weeks? Like 9 weeks. I mean, there's a gap. I mean, I
Right.
think, had there been more shows just after the Arnold, it would have been much easier for those guys to get more guys of a show. And I liked it when it was the Iron Man, the Arnold, then maybe Australia or San
Sure.
Francisco or whatever. It seemed like a really good start to the season. You have a small gap, then you've got the New York, and it goes on like that. Do you think there should be, I suppose, maybe more, more from maybe, I don't know, the federation or whoever to urge contests to be put on, or maybe incentivize people to put on contests at the start of a season? Because we even saw it at the start of last year where the competitions just weren't as competitive and all the guys just saved it to Texas, Tampa, and all those sorts of shows.
Well, there's a lot of moving pieces there because of the way the sport's structured. There's individual promoters, so the federation doesn't put on any show. So it's not like Major League Baseball, who puts the schedule out, puts it together. The IFBB Pro League in its inception it's a entity. It's a sanctioning body. That's what they do, and so it's just the way it's structured. Whether that's right or wrong, that's a topic for another day. But again, using that hypothesis of we got $100 million to spend. This is why I would kind of structure it differently, where it's your job. Let's just say, okay, Xavier, I'm going to put you on contract, and I'm going to pay you $200,000 a year to be a pro bodybuilder, and that's what you're going to do. That's your job, and as such, it would be structured out. Maybe that's something where as a entity ourselves, we put the structure together. We put the shows together. We put them on X amount of dates and things like that, where it's a constant flow. So, again, I know this is all fantasy land stuff, but I think that would greatly lend to the fan base being able to keep up with what's going on, follow the action. It becomes a weekly television show, right? Just like you watch, WWE wrestling, and next week is a continuation of last week, and so on and so on and so on. So I think that would be a great way to do it if you had just unlimited funds and a whole bunch of people that are willing to put some effort together.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we're seeing more of it now. Like we're seeing like Jake Wood put money into, the whole setup they've got with what's the show that Tarek does? I'm trying to think. Primetime Muscle, and all those shows. Isabel
Yep.
Terrell, sorry,
Yep.
does her show, Fit Rockstar, and we're seeing more of that, which I think is great because, like you said, we get to follow the personalities a little bit more. We're getting more interviews, and obviously, through people interviewing on YouTube, Fuad's channel, Nick Strength and Power. I think
Sure.
that's all great, and we're getting more discussion, but I think I would like to see, yeah, I would almost like to see it. I think how the WWE does it, UFC, they have like the fight passes and all that sort of
Correct.
stuff. I would love to see, a good chunk of money put into that. I mean, obviously, I don't have the money to do it, and who am I to say for someone else to spend their money?
Well,
But
you're
have
on the
a
right track, Xavier. What you've got to do is you've got to create heroes and villains. What makes any of these things work is, and the one thing that's killed bodybuilding over the years since day one is you can't be indifferent to the athletes or what's going on. When you don't care, that's a big problem. You have to hate people, like people, cheer people on, root against people, pick a side, fan base. You need a true fan base. That's what makes any sport go on, whether it's soccer or football or anything. And that's why I say it's important to have a weekly program as such or things like that. When I say program, I'm not talking about podcasts and things like that. Those are all great. We all do them. But I mean from the sport itself, because when the personalities can be as big as the physiques, then you've got something to sell.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I totally agree. And we've seen that. I think we've got examples of that. UFC, WWE, all these other sports, And I love we've got sports here in Australia where all the guys are media trained, their answers are so boring, and it's like, like watching an interview with a player is pointless. You're not going to hear anything. They're never going to speak out against
Right,
their
right.
teammates. But in the NBA, you got these guys, have more of a leash, I guess, before they get
Yeah.
suspended or fined. And if they get fined, it's 25,000, and to them, it's like doesn't matter. But yeah,
Well,
I
listen, I
love
mean,
the fact that bodybuilders
just
can
to
talk.
further that note, they've actually done this with probably the most boring thing you can possibly think of in this
Darts.
entire world, which is poker.
Oh yeah.
Now, think about this for a second, right? So at some point, 15 years ago, whatever it was, somebody came into an executive room, plunked down at the desk, and said, "Hey, I got a great idea. Why don't we televise poker?" And somebody had to look across the table and go, "Are you out of your mind? Like, you want to
Mm.
actually televise people playing cards? And you think that would be interesting, right?" But what did they do? They actually created interest in watching poker. How did they do it? Creating characters.
Yeah.
All these guys are characters. They got the big mouth. They got this guy and that guy. They got all these nicknames up. The Unabomber guy, Chris Ferguson. They call him Jesus. He's got the long hair. Looks like Jesus. But they created characters, and then they talk about we'll call it the sport of poker, and they made it interesting to watch. If you can do that with poker, you can certainly do it with bodybuilding.
Yeah, and you got World Series darts as well, where they've made it a real event, and people go there, drink, and they're yelling, and they got horns, and it's a huge thing, and they've got this cult following. But it's also a thing where, if I knew a dart event was coming here and it's like the World Series or something, I'm like, hey, that'd be pretty fun to go to, because you might start to the atmosphere, the personalities, all that sort of stuff. So I think that bodybuilding has that ability, and now I'd say overall there's less of a stigma when it comes to PEDs. It's more. Before it used to be like, shh, don't talk about it. If you talked about it, you'd lose your supplement contract. And now
nobody cares anymore.
Nobody cares. Yeah. And telehealth and all that sort of stuff, and people having, the ability to get on prescription testosterone and all that sort of stuff. So it really does take a bit more of a stigma out of it. To the mainstream, it's still maybe a little bit iffy, but especially here in Australia, we're always behind the times. But it's I think now, and moving forward, I think it's a good opportunity for bodybuilding to be able to move more. I mean, it's moved more into the mainstream in general because people are into fitness. Everyone knows someone who competes in bikini or men's physique or bodybuilding or something. So I think it's just more in the mainstream. And I think now's the time for bodybuilding to, take that sort of initiative and start like a pay-per-view channel where, we say to promoters, look, you can have your sponsor, work out some sort of deal where it doesn't screw over the promoters and it just benefits the sport as a whole. And if it grows as a whole, promoters benefit, competitors benefit, and then the federation, for maybe short-term pain, will be long-term gain.
There's a lot of possibilities, and I'd love to explore. I've had some ideas for years I'd love to be able to share with the federation, with the Olympia, in ways that I think that we can promote to get to the next level. And they include some of those things. A revenue share, I think, would be a good way to go with the athletes. Maybe and there's 10 different ways you can go with something like that. It's just all in discussion, but that's why you have the discussion. Maybe the participating athletes, everybody's, times have changed, right? Everybody's got a platform now, social media, access to millions of people, of fans, people that are interested in the sport. So they're out there. We don't have to be, quote, mainstream. We don't have to appeal to our own sport and interests, which is millions of people. And, and that's evidenced by what we just, led this segment off with, which was FIBO. There's hundreds of thousands of people that go to FIBO, and the whole base, the pivot foot, is health and fitness, is bodybuilding. That's, there's lots of other things that go on there now, but that is the main thing that's still there. Much like the Arnold Classic, it's still bodybuilding at its inception. And then there's a whole bunch of other things that kind of go along with that. So, there's 100 ideas, but, without exploring them, we'll be doomed to repeat the last 20 years and the next 20 years.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I wanted to mention as well, on the 25th this month, they're doing on Olympia TV. I don't know if you're on that one or not. I know they've got Jay Cutler. Yeah, you're on there. And then you've got Tarek and Steve Weinberger. And you're basically making the announcement of who's competing in the Masters Olympia in 2023, which is going to be cool. I'm excited to see the list. Do you know if that will be every federation? I mean, every federation, every division, like the 212 Olympia and the Classic?
So as far as I know, there's 10 divisions, which is pretty much everything. I don't believe there's wheelchair, which, again, I could be mistaken. I think that's number 11, but all the main basic divisions are there. There's 10 divisions, and it's a pretty healthy prize money. You got to give it up to Jake Wood and the Olympia team and the good folks at Wings of Strength for putting this together. And, listen, we'll see what kind of interest it draws. It's in Romania. I think everybody knows that by now, and let's see what kind of champs come out. I mean, you might be surprised with some of the names, and I'm not privy to it. I mean, I don't know who they've selected or who's been, put on that list, and then it's up to the athlete whether they want to accept that or not. But it should still be pretty interesting to see who shows up. I'd like to see a true Masters. I think, the age is a little low for me. I mean, I'd like to see it a little bit higher. I know they lowered it at some point, but maybe when it catches on, maybe if it's around for 2-3 years and actually it has some legs, that it can continue on. But a true Masters, to me, I don't know. I mean, half the pros are over 40, so 45, 50 maybe.
Yeah, and I think as well, if it's 40 plus and you've got guys 40 plus doing the main Olympia
Right.
and they're not doing the Masters Olympia, it's sort of like, well, you're not really the best 40 plus guy in the world. So you're not, you know what I mean? It's got that sort of feel to it. But I think, like you said, I think once it builds up some momentum, maybe they could do it. Brett Wilkin came on the podcast and he was talking with, Jake Wood and all those guys. And he was saying that eventually they might want to do a 40 plus, 50 plus and split it up that way. So you got more guys that be the Kamal El Gagni range
Sure.
in terms of
Well,
age. But
again, this is, it's all in discovery. I mean, it has been around in, I think, 10 or 11 years now. And is there a market for it? Well, if it's promoted properly and if it's put together, listen, it doesn't mean that things can't change or be incorporated in. Maybe it's something that ends up on Olympia weekend. Like you said, maybe it's something that has different age categories. Maybe there's an over 40 and over 50 and over 60. That type of a setup. I'm open to pretty much anything as long as it has a return and there's an interest level. If it doesn't have an interest level, then there's no real good reason to do it.
Yeah, for sure. No, 100%. And I wanted to discuss one thing as well. You interviewed William Bonac out there at FIBO, and he sort of spoke on retirement when he might be finishing his career. So it sounds like to me he's planning on doing the Arnold Classic in 2024, but he didn't even 100% guarantee that. But he said, "Yeah, I want to come back for the fans and
Yeah.
to see where he's sort of at." Because he said he could go. I think on my podcast he said he could go for another 3 or 4 years, and he sort of said 2 or 3 on yours or something. So it sounds like the 2024 Arnold Classic for William Bonac is sort of a make or break show for him, and he's going to see where he's at. What do you think, and how do you think William Bonac can do in terms of doing that 2024 Arnold? Because in 2022 at the Arnold, people argued that he could have won.
Yeah, well, he's had some setbacks over the last couple of years. I mean, he's been very upfront with that. Some physical things, and he's been going for a while. I mean, as I pointed out on my Voice of Bodybuilding podcast a few segments ago, William is the only guy competing from 10 years ago. There's only two guys left, ironically enough, and it's Big Ramy and William Bonac. So if you go back just 10 years, they're all gone. A few we've lost, unfortunately, and the other ones have all retired or moved on to other things. So it's interesting when you look at it, but, he's the last guy holding the torch, really. And Big Ramy, both who have been subject lately of retirement talks. Not that I said that. God forbid we should ever bring up that word to anybody. But William's been very candid with his comments about where he's at. And as you heard on my interview with him, he's in the end game. He knows he doesn't have a lot of gas left in the tank. I think he's smart to basically go out on, what would consider. I mean, listen, he's had a great career. Let's face it. He's done everything except win the Olympia. And that's pretty damn good where I'm coming from. It's a great career. He's had a long career, but he knows it's that time, and he wants to basically go out on stage. That's the type of thing where, I've never been a big fan of the invite. I think I've been pretty vocal with that. I'm not a fan of giving people invites for any good reason, but that is an exception. Now, let's just say hypothetically, if Williams said, okay, listen, I'm done. I'm calling it a day. I'm going to put in for a special invite and finish my career on the Olympia stage, I would have no problem with that. I think he's earned it. I think he's been around for 10 years. He's been a top contender for most of those 10 years. Let's face it. Multiple Arnold Classic champ. I don't have any issue with that. I'd like to see a guy go out with style, with dignity, with his hand held high and a 10,000 person standing ovation or whatever, number we have for our champions that have been, let's face it, he's been a pillar in the bodybuilding community now for a decade. So I would have no issue with that.
Yeah, for sure. I would love to see William Bonac go out on stage at the Mr. Olympia, whenever that is, for sure. And I actually was thinking about it a bit as well. And he mentioned it when I interviewed him recently. He said, had it not been for Brandon narrowly beating him twice, he didn't say narrowly. I'm saying that because it was two close battles with Brandon.
Yeah, it was close.
He could have four Arnold Classic titles, and he's got second in the Olympia. So he's nearly close to being an Olympia champion and close to being a 4-time Arnold champion. And even if you got one of those, 3-time Arnold champion, even 2-time, which is what he has, is absolutely crazy. So he's had a great career, and I think it almost goes a little bit under the radar or a little bit underrated because people have sort of, I suppose, the last few years sort of counted him out a little bit, and he sort of had ups and downs with the Arnold, and then the Olympia's going down a little bit and whatnot. But yeah, I'm excited to see him back in 2024 and see what he can do on that
Well, and
stage.
he's at that magical 40 number. He's 41, I believe. A year older than Big Ramy, or almost two. Big Ramy will be 40 coming up, and it's not easy. I mean, listen, anybody who's been there knows. You'll talk to any pro bodybuilder who's been there and done that, and they will tell you it's like hitting a switch. You hit 40, and your training should change. I should say needs to change, but it should change. And I've gone into that in depth on a Voice of Bodybuilding I did, where I kind of outlined, between 20, you're in your 20s, you're kind of building a base. You're at the national level. Chances are you're working on your physique. You're getting up to that level. When you're in your 30s, you're in your prime. Like, that's it. You're going to hit your 30s, and you are in prime time for whatever physique it is that you're going to build. As you get into your 40s, if you're still competitive, the smart play is to change your training around. And this has been proven time after time after time, where you've had a Dorian Yates type of a guy, or Ronnie Coleman. I mean, there's two great examples right there. Jay Cutler. As these guys got closer to 40, injuries become a problem. You can't train the way you did when you were in your 20s and 30s. But here's the deal. You don't have to. Once you've built the base, once you've maintained, now you're working on fine details in your pro career. You don't need that heavy stuff anymore. You don't need the squats. You certainly don't need the damn bench press, as we've seen another victim in Half Thor who just tore his pec off the bone the other day. Doing what? The flat bench. Once again, I've written articles about this, Xavier, 20 years ago, that I was never a fan of the bench press. It's a terrible movement. It's something that you want to use in that 20s range. And even at that, limited. Use it as an exercise. Don't use it as the be-all, end-all. Once you get up there in that 400, 500 range, it's inevitable. You're going to tear a pec at some point. It's literally just a matter of whether you get lucky or not. And unfortunately, in Half Thor, who I consider a friend, that may just put his career out at this point. Recovering from that at this point is going to be very difficult. But guys, if you're going to take anything away from this chat tonight, take the bench press, put it in your back pocket. All right. Don't use it as a bench type of thing. Okay. Just use it as an exercise. 2 1/4, 315. Use it to pump and to build, but it should have no more relevance than an incline or a pec deck or a decline or a cables movement. These are all just tools for you to build your physique. And as the old famous saying goes, my friend, it's not how much you bench, it's how much you look like you can bench.
Exactly. I've seen plenty of guys in the gym, and even me when I was like 17 years old. I just turned 17. I was like, I'm stronger on bench then than I would be. Obviously now I'm a bit small at the moment, but even a few years ago when I was a bit bigger. And it's, my chest was nothing. My front delts were taking over and all that sort of stuff. And it was really an ego thing at that age. And I think once you get a bit older and learn, like I rarely ever do flat bench now. And I think I saw a video with John Meadows where he spoke about it, where he's like, we're going to do the incline dumbbell presses out, sort of our heavy building movement, X amount of reps, and we'll just sort of increase each set. And then he went to the flat bench, I think second or third, once he's already pumped, and then he would, do it in a way where it was 12 reps and it was controlled and, slower centric and, really focusing on the muscle, not focusing just on the, I suppose, up and down.
Well, you got to people have to, you really got to do some history lesson here, people. And, you can learn a lot about what's going on right now from the past. These exercises, the core movements that everybody swears on, right? The bench press, the squat, the deadlift, you got to do this, you got to do that. These were invented in the 1800s, okay? That's what they had to work with. They did not have the technology we have today. There's beautiful equipment out there today. Ergonomically correct, made into, move with the way your body moves. Here comes a nice cheap plug for you, but hey, that's what we do here.
Panada?
I'm a global ambassador, a representative of Panada equipment. It's the finest equipment in the world. And Mr. Panada, Rudy Panada, who's been around since the 70s, 72 years old now. This guy's still inventing machines. Those machines are so correct in terms of how they function with your body. The fact that they're multi-adjustable. Handles are turned. They're not square, okay? All these things are intricate to keeping you healthy as you move on. The last thing I would be doing in today's day and age is a damn bench press, because it's really not that great of an exercise. It's considered great, but that's just because it's been around. And if you ask somebody, well, why do you got a bench? They don't have a real, well, you got a bench.
Mm.
You know, it's like you're being, completely against the entire process. Oh, well, what do you mean you don't bench? You know, like you got to feel bad about it. And listen, the squat is a great exercise also, but it's really good to build a foundation. Once you get past that, once you're squatting whatever, 500, 600 pounds, 700 pounds, and you're a pro in this 30, the only thing that's growing is your ass. That's it. Your thighs are tapped out. You're not getting any bigger legs at that point. Your butt's taking up most of the weight that you're squatting with, and it's not going to lend to a better physique. You see guys and their physiques change as you get older. You don't want the hips wider. You don't want the midsection wider. Why would you train like a power lifter if you want to look like a bodybuilder?
Yeah, for sure. And it's one of those things. I've seen some guys. I remember there's a guy back. I don't know if you remember him, Bob. He competed in Australia a few times. He was Asian. I don't want to say which Asian nationality because I'm not 100% sure. I believe it was Japanese. His name's Wong Hong, and he didn't squat ever. And
I
his
remember Wong.
legs were phenomenal. They were highlighted of his physique by far. And he said, no, I never squat. And I was like, wow. And back then I was younger and I was like,
Yeah.
you have to squat, you have to squat. And yeah, never squatted, just hack squatted, did some other leg presses, other movements, and it was just about the intensity and focusing on the muscle, and worked for him.
Well, again, look at the equipment that you have access to now. I mean, the squat is probably one of the last things I would do when you've got fantastic equipment out there. I mean, look at the swing squats now that they have, the hack squats, the leg presses, that are adjustable in terms of that's just not a 45-degree angle anymore. You've got wonderful equipment out there that you can use that has technology behind it. That's what you want to use. Putting a bar on your back, compressing the spine, the force on the knees and all that. Again, there's nothing wrong with it if used properly, but again, that's a young man's exercise. You don't need that. When you're into your 15, 16, 20, and you're still piling that weight on your back, your joints are taking a beating. And as I outlined again when I was talking about how your training needs to change in your 20s, 30s, and 40s, by the time you get into your 40s, the last thing you need to be doing is putting more stress on the joints and all that you've been beating up for 20-something years now. So it literally just doesn't make any sense. But, people, do your homework, but listen to those of us that are telling you now. It's not that we don't like certain listen, everybody's got their likes and their dislikes, right? But we're telling you this because we've been there and done that. The difference between you and I is I've been where you are, but you haven't been where I am. All right. That's the difference when you get older. And we're trying to tell the younger generation. Now, look I'm telling you now, I was a test, subject for this stuff. And I'm telling you what's going to happen. And believe me, it's going to happen. Now, whether you get lucky, whether you don't, whether you escape injury, there's a lot of factors in there, including genetics, prior, whatever, drug use, how much wear and tear you've had, nutrition. I mean, all this stuff piles up, but, use your head, guys. I mean, again, it's not a weightlifting contest. If you're a competitive bodybuilder, then these are just all tools at your disposal. It's like an artist using different brushes. Okay. The end result is going to be this beautiful painting, but the brushes are just tools to get there. That's what weight training equipment is. They're just tools to shape your body, sculpt the physique that you want to sculpt. And again, if you're in the pro bodybuilding, that's the essence of what we're doing. There is no bench press round. There is no scale on the stage. Nobody gives a shit about how big your arms are. Oh, I got 23-inch arms. Great. If they look like they're 16 inches, that ain't going to help you a whole lot. It's all smoke and mirrors.
Exactly. And I'm almost like a cautionary tale because I've got 3 bulging discs in my back now, and I was always of the opinion, you got to squat, you got to squat, you got to squat.
No.
And I was squatting, and I was like, you got to squat deep, and I was squatting to the point where I was getting the butt wink, and it was affecting my lower back. And I paid for it, to the point where I literally couldn't get from a chair onto the toilet myself for a number of probably only days to that point. But it was like, putting your socks on, you take it for granted, and it made me really, really take note of, okay, injury prevention, don't do stupid movements that don't feel right, don't feel good. And, concentrate on the muscle more rather than the movement. And I always did concentrate on the muscle, but you always get these
Sure.
ideologies that you sort of follow. And I sort of learned the hard way,
Most
but at least I've learned now.
most injuries in bodybuilding are caused by the ego. First and foremost. I mean, it's got nothing to do with anything else, because here's the problem, right? You get on there and you got your buddies in the gym and you're going to do a leg press and you got whatever, 1,500 pounds on there, and you do it easily. So what do? Throw another plate on there, right? Oh, bro, come on, you got this, man. That was easy, right? So the only thing that really stops you from doing it, from keep moving, whether it's to the right end of the dumbbell rack or whether it's, to getting that last plate on top of the machine because you've run out of room. The only thing that stops you usually is injury. You get hurt, and then you got to stop or go to something else or heal up, right, or whatever. Or you just simply can't lift the weight. But that's it. In bodybuilding terminology, that's the only reason that you stop, because that seems to be the way to go, right? If you can do the 90s, well, I want to get to the hundreds. Man, I've had a goal. I want to get to those 120s, thinking that's the golden ticket, but it's not, because other muscle groups start coming into play. So I don't care if you are capable of doing a 120-pound dumbbell, incline press. That the question is are you working chest? Because once the weight gets to a certain load, well, the triceps got to kick in, right? The back muscles are going to kick in. It needs a little bit of help. So you might be lifting more weight, but are you using the muscles that you're trying to train? In that case, chest. Or you see guys, you've seen this for years yourself. Guy in the gym doing curls with ridiculous weight, swinging the weights up. He's not getting any bigger arms. He'd be better off doing a concentration curl. But the problem is the ego. Hey, man, I got to curl those 70s. But you're not curling 70s. You're getting about 40 pounds worth there. And then your back is getting the rest and the triceps pushing it up. And it's not a very good curl. You don't have to be stiff like a robot, but there is a fine line there between, am I really, the mind muscle connection and all those things you hear about. Am I training the body part that I'm trying to train? Or again, am I just working for ego just to say, well, I got this amount of weight up? That doesn't do you a damn bit of good when you're on stage.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes that even, the really sloppy form where they don't know what muscle they're using, you see a lot of sloppy physiques and physiques that have structural issues where their shoulders will be, hunched and they've got overdeveloped traps and things like that, where they have no delts, big traps, all those sorts of things. So yeah, definitely make a good point there, Bob. And I just wanted to say as well, I was actually in a gym yesterday and training back, and there was an old school piece of Panada equipment. It was like a pull down sort of one where it had close handles and then ones out here and stuff as well. And it was used the whole time I was wanting to use it. Because I think it was pretty popular with everyone there, and it was generally the guys that look good using it as well. So I was like, okay, well next time I'm around here, I'll definitely want to use that bit of equipment. So it goes to say something for
it's the Ferrari of bodybuilding equipment. There's a huge difference between, and I've seen them all. I have worked with companies, multiple companies. I've worked on pretty much every piece of equipment that's out there, and there's some decent stuff that I like as well, but not as good. The Panada brand, and there's over 500 individual pieces, because Rudy Panada is nuts. When I say nuts, I mean that with all due respect. Huge. This guy never stops thinking. Those wheels are turning, I swear, 24/7. He's always thinking about, what can I do with this piece? How can I make this so that you can focus even more on whatever it is? And there's some fantastic pieces of equipment that you can tell have got a lot of years. He's redesigned his own machines 3 or 4 times, because if he doesn't like something, or he'll get the prototype. I mean, it looks like a beautiful finished piece of equipment, and he doesn't like it because he thinks it's off an inch. He'll have those guys tear that thing apart, recut it, redo it, put it together until it's to his satisfaction. So there's a reason that they're number one in the industry, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, that's so cool. I love that. I'd love to check out their factory or something one day and just what the process is like. Like you said,
I was just there last month. Unbelievable.
Oh, cool.
And everything, I don't want to turn this into a whole Panada commercial, but everything is made there at the factory. Everything. There's no parts from China. There's no parts that get shipped in from under. When I say everything, the only thing that doesn't get made there are the actual plates. The actual plates that you put on them, because they don't have a big, you got to have a smelting, the giant cauldron of molten metal machine, So that does get made somewhere else, but I don't really count that. Everything else that you see, every piece of equipment that you see, every little intricate thing that's on there is made in that factory in Italy. It's in a tiny little town that sits on top of a mountain. You would never think that this factory is where it is. But I tell you what, man, it is one impressive thing to see. And actually, you will be able to see it, my friend, because I took video when I was there. And in a future episode coming up soon of the Voice of Bodybuilding, my friend, once again, I'm going to give you the inside view of the Panada factory and all the raw metal right to finished piece that goes out the door. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so cool. But Bob, I want to get into a few listener questions because we've got a bunch coming in and I want to catch up to them. So
here
you guys
we
are
go.
in the comments.
Here we
and
go.
You got your best friend as well, Lee Priest, in the comments too. So I'm sure there's some interesting comments from him. But we'll start with this guy here, AK. He says, does Bob really believe Hardy can beat an 100% Nick who made the improvements to his legs while bringing the freak size and volume with the conditioning to match?
Yeah, he just did. It was called last year's Olympia.
But with improved legs.
Well, listen, Hardy can improve too, right? So, yeah. I mean, listen, Nick, everybody can improve, okay? But what you can't improve is your structure or your proportions. And that's where Nick's going to have a tough time against the Hardy. And not just Hardy, because I believe Hardy's going to have a difficult time repeating this year. If I'm making an early prediction, I've already put out there, I think Sampson's literally the man to beat. I think it'll come down to him and Derek Lunsford. And you've got some other new guys coming on. So Nick's got his work cut out, but you can never count Nick out because he's a workhorse and he will work himself to death. And all he's done is improve. So you don't ever count him out, you know what I mean? But by the same token, we got to keep things real. And I got to look at what I see when it comes to structure, shape, symmetry, proportion, muscularity, display of the muscle. All those factors come into play. So is Nick a contender? Absolutely. Do I think he can beat Hardy? If they're both 100%, no.
I agree with that as well. But Nick's a guy that could win an Olympia in the scenario where, look, I don't want to say he can only win an Olympia if everyone's off, but if we see Derek Lunsford and we're like, oh, he's a little bit washed out from the back, and we see maybe Hardy, Hardy tried to bring conditioning and maybe he was just a little bit more flat and Nick looks bigger, and then Sampson doesn't nail it 100%. You can see Nick slipping in there. So I'm not ever saying that I don't think Nick will win an Olympia, because he probably will at some stage. There'll just be one Olympia.
Hey, listen, you know what? That's why we play the game, and you're exactly right. Listen, a guy named Branch Warren, who I'm pretty good friends with, did pretty good in his career, I would say, taking a runner-up in the Olympia. Almost won that, and Arnold Classics and every other title you could possibly get. Branch, admittedly, over the years, him, he's very candid, very, blue collar, type of a guy. He just simply outworked everybody and brought that trademark conditioning. And listen, he did not have the prettiest physique on the planet, and he knew it. And he didn't care one bit. He went out there, he brought his best. He was very consistent. And I see Nick in the same sort of boat. So he catches these guys sleeping, he could be a Mr. Olympia.
Absolutely. Next question from Isabel, Fit Rockstar Terrell, says, Bob,
Isabel,
what can we do to bring entertainment value to bodybuilding as let's be honest, it's not that exciting as it can be?
No, unfortunately, and I've been very candid about this over the years, you could attest to this, I'm sure. You go to a bodybuilding show, and we all love bodybuilding. We're all in the bodybuilding business. I've been in this game literally my entire life. You can't sit there and watch a show. You can't do it. You can sit there, you watch a little bit, maybe you go up there when the big boys get out there, whatever. What you end up doing is you end up out in the lobby shooting the shit with your buddies, right? Or talking to the people that are at the booths or whatever, because you literally can't sit there. Now, listen, not everything's for everybody, all right? You may not have any interest in the women's stuff or bikini or whatever, all right? So maybe you're a hardcore bodybuilding fan. Even that, it's not the most exciting stuff. Like I said earlier, it's ironic she should ask that question. I would be turning shows into more shows, honestly. Listen, if the judging's done, it's done, right? Doesn't mean you can't have an element of judging at the night show. But how about being more loose at night? How about having other things that go on? How about, again, think wrestling. I always think, WWE side of me always wants to come out. Or, it could be interviews at night on stage, people confronting each other on stage. There could be different pose downs and different things. I would have way more entertainment value, or it becomes interesting. Maybe there's backstage stuff that we can be privy to, but anything to increase the interest, to make it where it's not like watching, paint dry, like ether out there sometimes. And the only excitement we ever get is the pose down, because it's the only time anybody's really interacting, right? I mean, so I would be looking more towards entertainment style things like that, to get into a show. Again, make them more shows and less competitions, and I think we would get more interest.
I think as well with like I never was watching the Olympia back. It was when I was just getting into bodybuilding back in 2004 when they had, I believe it's 2004, where they had the challenge round. They had Triple H. That obviously didn't go down that well, but they could have, I think, refined it, changed it, and made it something that's a bit better
here's
than
the
it was,
problem, right? And it's interesting because I came up with an idea back then, which was in opposition to that. I knew the challenge round would bomb because there was literally just more of the same stuff. It was two guys hitting a lat spread. That's not exactly riveting when they just did the prejudging and two guys were hitting a lat spread, right? Or they were all up there being compared. So it was just an extension of more of the same stuff. I had an idea back then, which I called the People's Champ round, which I submitted. Unfortunately, they didn't go with it, but something for the future. So do you remember Bloodsport?
Oh, I've seen it, but I've spent ages.
No. God, you young guys, man! I tell you, come on, Jean-Claude Van Damme, man, Bloodsport.
Yeah, I've seen it, but I haven't seen it in forever. Like when I was a kid.
See, this is the problem with you 20-somethings, all right? Anyway, do your
I'm 30-something. I'm 30-something.
Yeah, whatever. So I got a few on you, but all right. So for those out there, all right, Bloodsport. It was basically the Kumite. It was guys fighting one on one, right? All that kind of stuff. All right, you put 20. Let's just say there's 20 guys on the Olympia stage, right? Two random names come up. Boom. They pop up in the thing. These two guys come to the front. Gentlemen, pose down. They pose down for a minute or two, or whatever it is. Let the audience decide who moves on to the next round. All right? Loser, boom, you're out. Winner, you're on to the next round. So you have a series of pose downs. Now, you can imagine some of the lines, especially now, this is back in the day, right? When we had some guys that had some style with their posing. Melvin Anthony, a Durham Charles, a Tricky Jackson, right? You had, how about two of these guys get up there? And they can out funk each other for two. Audience would go crazy. Let the audience pick it. Let them pick it. And 20 turns into 10. 10 guys go up again. So you just keep cutting it down until it's two guys. The winner is the People's Champ. But at least do it with a series of pose downs. At least it's exciting. They can mix it up, push each other around, get in front of each other. Really trying to show off your best assets. If you got really two good posers out there who can have some fun. At least it's movement. It's fun. It's interesting, right?
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, imagine like back in the day seeing like a Durham Charles, a Melvin Anthony having a pose down, and then I think like a guy like Melvin would be so perfect. For something like that.
Well, that's what I had in mind because those were the guys we were playing with at that time. And listen, it could be anybody. It's just a complete random draw. So let's just say two superstars go out there. Well, one's going to win and one's going to lose on that round. So it's not necessarily like the same guy's going to win because the people may go for the underdog. So maybe the little guy get out there, the crowd gets behind and they love him and, he ends up winning. But, I like the idea. Now what that did encourage was the People's Champ Award that we do now where the audience does pick it, but it's purely based on, online or even in the crowd, but it's based on just who they like. Whether
I think your
idea is popular champion or right.
I think your idea is much more exciting. It's
me too.
We want to see something done to achieve that award, not just who we like most. Absolutely. So,
and if you keep it limited, listen, it wouldn't take forever to do. You just have a series of 1 minute pose downs, 2 minute pose down. So at best, you're looking at maybe 15 minutes. I don't know. For 15 minutes, I'd rather be entertained.
For sure. And I almost wouldn't mind it if a guy wins a round, then he gets a pool of guys to pick from or something like that. And then, if he can pick his rival or something and have fun with it too. And it would be really, really cool. I think that's a really good idea. Okay, let's move on to the next questions. That's when I dropped out of the stream. Let me just find the next ones. I fixed the audio. Here we go. This is when you were talking about the heroes and villains.
Who's this Lee Priest guy?
Says, I knew Bob missed me. I'm a villain. Let's look.
You know what, though? Listen, I mean, me and Lee go way back. We've had our differences. And actually, we do, see eye to eye on other things. But, What makes Lee still to this day so interesting to the people is that he is controversial, right? He speaks his mind. He says what he wants to say. He does what he wants to do. And listen, he's still a polarizing image in the world of bodybuilding, and he hasn't been on a stage in years. So that's just proof positive to exactly what I'm saying. And listen, for that money, I'll take 10 Lee priests out there and, give me the characters, man. I mean, I love those guys. Give me a Blessing, a Wadabu. Listen, he didn't do as well as he wanted to in the Olympia, but you know what? I'll take those personalities all day long because they sell tickets and people like them or they hate them. And listen, if you're well hated, again, it's heroes and villains, man. That's what sells.
100%. Totally agree. Goof Juice says press conference needs to be revamped. What do you think, Bob?
I completely agree.
He didn't say what do you think, Bob. I just said that just for clarification.
Yeah, that's okay. I agree. Listen, I've been trying to get it revamped for years. Hopefully, that's something I can help out with this year. And to be totally honest with you, to me, I would get rid of it. Now, when I say that, all right, there's a caveat to that. The problem with the press conference always has been is that it's before the show. So it's only so interesting. Listen, first of all, the guys are depleted. They're beat. They're trying to get their preps and they're tanning and they're, they haven't had whatever, right? Whatever you are at that point in your prep. So it's never going to be that exciting. We do the most we can with it. It's like pulling teeth. I mean, it's very, very difficult. This as an interviewer yourself. You can only imagine being in my shoes where you're up there with, 20 guys who will all want to sit there and say, well, I'm just here to bring my best package and just going to do the best I can. And, listen, that's not exciting and it doesn't sell tickets. So when I say I'd get rid of it, what I would do is I would kind of reincorporate it, redesign it, and I would have it at the Meet the Olympians on Thursday night where, it wouldn't be in the full scale that you see. I would have more of a booths type setup, like with a desk, type of a thing where you could have interviews and things like that. And it wouldn't be everybody, but maybe you pick some favorites out and things like that. All right. Very small, just a way scaled down, type of thing. While you're there with all the athletes at the Meet the Olympians, what I would do is I would take the Sunday seminar, and that's what I would supersize because that's after the show. You've got results. Somebody beat somebody. Somebody won. Somebody lost. Somebody got screwed, of course, right? So, politics, this, that, right? Imagine the material you could have with having those people on Sunday after the show instead of before the show. Lots more to talk about.
I agree. I like it with both because I'm into the media side of things, so I want as much content as possible, and especially to hype the show at that last minute. I understand why they do it then. They're obviously going to sell more more live streams and all that sort of stuff. So I like it before. I would just like the actual press conference to be partly like. I would like you to, you or whoever hosts it to dictate, and make sure that the rivals get to sort of have their say about each other and things like that. But also for there to be a section where the press each have one question or something. Well,
here's the funny part, bro. Again, you're a fairly new guy, so we actually did that years ago because I used to get complaints at the quote press conference. None of the press would ask anything. so we actually
I do remember this too. I do.
Yeah, and they didn't have one question. Like nobody said nothing. It's like, all right, we're done with this here. But adding on to that, okay. And again, I don't have any problem with doing something beforehand. I just think it would be better served while we have all the athletes at the Meet the Olympians, anyways. But I would be doing these things well in advance. I would be doing it in Pittsburgh. I would be doing it in New York. I would be doing it in Chicago. I would be doing it in Tampa. That's when you put together. Remember, I was just talking a few minutes ago about revamping night shows, right? Finals, and having them more entertaining. These are the type of things that you put out at a night show. Bring out Nick Walker and Derek Lunsford, right? On stage with a couple of microphones, take a few minutes and have some fun with it or whatever. That's the time when these guys got some food in them and they got some energy and the show's 4 or 5 months away or whatever. And you could have all kinds of fun with these type of things. I'd be whipping out an Olympia contract right there for whoever wins that show on the spot. Have Jake Wood there, have Dan Solomon there, have whatever. Put a couple contracts in your pocket and put the challenge right there to somebody to sign it. Sign it right here, right now. None of this lollygagging around. Well, let me talk to my trainer bullshit and all that. No, man. Let's have that fun right there on the spot. But these are things that to sell tickets, It's like a movie premiere, right? You're going to see a premiere right now for a movie that ain't coming out until the end of the fall because they want to get interest in it. They want you to get in. Oh man, I can't wait till the new, Guardians of the Galaxy come out, or whatever the movie is, right? Having it the day before the movie comes out doesn't really help you, much like a press conference the day before the show doesn't really sell tickets. You're either going or you ain't at that point.
Yeah.
You're either buying a pay-per-view or you ain't. But these are things that we should be promoting and marketing and putting out and branding 6 months, 5 months, 4 months, 3 months. You see where I'm going?
And as well, like you got, some great videographers out there. Like you got Gilco who does, phenomenal job at the Olympia, and we're getting footage that we've never sort of seen before. I mean, a lot of that stuff, and even having him or someone like him or his crew to follow these guys out at Pittsburgh and get a ton of footage, just tons of footage backstage, get them talking about their thoughts about going into the Olympia. And we could do like before every competitor comes out. We've seen this in the past, and I actually quite liked it, but we could do it on another level where we get more of the personalities coming out in those before they come out for their posing routines. Where we have a minute or something where it's them on the screen and it's talking and it's building the personalities, saying how they want to take out a certain person or whatever, and then then that guy comes out later and then it's got him talking about him and vice versa, and we get to see that, and people would be more excited, I think, for the posing because it's more. People know the posing doesn't get judged, the posing round. I mean, people get to see on stage, but there's probably less emphasis on that. But if we can build a story with the posing routines, it makes it much more entertaining because sometimes like, okay, the guy walks out hitting shots to a song, next guy, and it's I'm excited for the call outs, and that sucks because I always used to be excited for the posing routines because I felt like they used to be of a higher standard. So I think that we need to build a story around those posing routines at the Olympia level.
Yeah, agreed. And and again, everything comes ebbs and flows. Everybody thinks because it's not scored that it's not judged. That's incorrect. You're absolutely judged from the second you walk on that stage till the second you walk off. That's why me and Milos always like to debate on that one. But the bottom line is listen, you get better posers than others in various times in history. I mean, we tend to talk about the old days much better than they were. Yes, there are some good posers, but they weren't all good. A lot of them sucked.
Yeah.
The same four names always come up. You thought, but back in the day, you had guys like Labrada and Benfato and this guy, and Sean Ray. It's always the same four guys. Bob Paris, right? You always hear these same names. You know why? Because there was an equal amount of them that couldn't pose for shit. Berto Fox and Nasser El Sanbadi and this guy, depending on what era you were in. Like right now, we don't have anybody that does any pop lock and stuff, right? But for a while there, you had a whole bunch. Again, there was Melvin, there was Tricky Jackson, there was Dazzling Durham Charles. I mean, that was kind of a trend that kind of came in there, and it was great for entertainment. But, whether it's the best, quote, posing routine, I don't know. But I'm all about the entertainment, so I'm all for it. But, and listen, there's some very good posers right now. Now it's split a little bit because we didn't have classic bodybuilding back then. You got that now. That's bodybuilding. Bodybuilding is bodybuilding. So, yeah, some of them just happen to be in classic. The Logan Franklins, man, I've seen some, Chris Bumstead is a very good poser. Breon, I thought was very good.
Yeah.
Terrence Ruffin's probably the best poser in the entire sport, bar none. But there are good posers out there. But, again, we just tend to focus on them and think the rest. Well, listen, not everybody's a great poser, in terms of display or rhythm or whatever. So it's not a dance contest; it's bodybuilding.
Yeah, exactly. Lee Priest suggests you guys do a show, Bob and the Villain.
Let me tell you, me and Lee would do a great show. There's no question about it. So,
yeah, for sure, that'd be very interesting. I'd love it.
I'm all for it.
I know you two don't hold back as well, so I would love to see that. I would love to see Lee on your channel, Bob, or both of you come on here, whatever suits.
Sure,
I'm down for it. Let's have a look. Yeah, Isabel confirming no wheelchair at the Masters Olympia. I'm just going through a few of these. People are more just having conversations with themselves in the comments. Let me just have a look.
It's funny how that works, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
They'll talk amongst themselves. I can't. Where's all the big Ramy questions? I thought that was going to be the big header. Still.
That's what I thought as well. People wanting to know what gear you're taking and running, so that's a compliment.
What?
Who said, what gear is Bob taking / running?
What gear?
Yeah.
Oh, you mean like
Uh,
juice, like gear or whatever you want to.
yeah.
I thought he meant like shifting gears, like type of thing for a minute. What gear am I running? I ain't running two things, jack and shit. This is what you get right now. This is 45 years of training is what this is. But other than some TRT every here and there, I don't do anything.
Yeah. We've got Natalia Coelho watching live as well.
Ah, that's my girl right there. Let me tell you something. One of the best, most genuine people you're ever going to meet in this sport. What a champ Natalia is. And she's going to be very, very difficult to beat this year. You can see her and Sarah, might be going back and forth for a couple of years now. But man, the improvements that she made this past year, Natalia, put her in the winner's circle. But I tell you what, man, all that did was light a fire under Sarah. So if you're following the women's physique stuff, these two will give you a good show this year at the Olympia. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, there's an outstanding top three, I think, at the Olympia as well. So it's one of those ones where anyone can win it. But yeah, Natalia she's probably the most dedicated person I've ever heard of in my life. So now we've got the Red Loop asked the question, Big Bob, you used to have massive legs. I'm curious to know what the bread and butter of your leg workout was.
That was pretty much all the basics. Now you got to remember, I grew up in the late 70s, in terms of bodybuilding. So I learned from the guys before me, and those guys were from the 60s. So squats, leg presses. Now again, you gotta consider the year. Okay, we didn't have 45-degree angle leg presses. It wasn't around yet. So the leg presses I worked on were those vertical ones that you got underneath and the weight was over your head. So those old school presses, which were really fun. But I tell you what, though, they built legs, man. But it was squats, hack squats. Extensions, curls. I mean, all pretty much the basic stuff. Lunges didn't really come around until a little bit later, but genetics play a hell of a role. I always had a pretty good quad sweep, even without doing anything. They, like I had kind of like frog legs, when I was a kid, just because I was very athletic.
See in the background, Bob.
Yeah, actually, that's a nice painting that was done of me. But yeah, you can see the basic. But as a little kid, I kind of looked the same, just a smaller version. But I was very athletic. Played every sport there was: football, baseball, everything. And the quad sweep was always there. Thanks, Mom and Dad.
Yeah, I have the opposite issue. So
yeah, well,
but
it happens,
the next
bro.
question. Yeah, that's it. The next question is from Massage Gun 56. Ask if Ramy is skipping this year's Olympia. So I made a video the other day. I knew Nick Strength of Powers made a video, and I think maybe someone else did as well, based on your video where you talked to Big Ramy at the 2023 FIBO just this past weekend, and you said you're not doing anything until next year's Olympia, right? Which I don't know if you meant the next Olympia or next year's or what you were meaning.
You just hit it. So what I meant to say was the next Olympia, not really. I consider next year. We all talk like in those terms, but it's really just a misspoken way of putting it. What I meant to say was, we're probably not going to see you until the next Olympia. Now, I think he was thinking the same thing. I don't think he's taking the entire year off, but he was pretty candid in that interview, as you heard, and he's pretty good. I mean, you can see there's a sense of he doesn't really know. He's in some uncharted waters right now, which he was pretty much telling everybody, which is he's going to have to see how his body responds. There has been some notable changes. I think we can all see that. And like he said in the interview, listen, he wanted to win the Olympia once. Twice was a blessing, and he feels very fortunate and that he's got not one but two. And if that date should come, he's good with that. So, but it's literally going to be a wait and see because we don't really know how he's going to respond to whatever treatment he's doing. We've heard he's doing some stem cell stuff, this and that. There is no guarantee with those type of things. I mean, if it involves nerves, which I think it does. And we've seen this with a lot of bodybuilders over the years. The body parts will just start to shrink up.
Ronnie.
It's a nerve impingement. It's whatever. Sometimes that don't come back. And if it don't come back, he would have a very difficult time. But what I'm glad about from Ramy personally, because I've known him for 10 years since he got in the league, and he's always been a big, gentle giant, really nice guy, well-spoken, and he had to learn English pretty good. He didn't speak almost any English when he came in the league. So he's done a very good job of learning the English language and then being an ambassador to the sport. But he's good with where he's at. I mean, he's very comfortable that he's a 2-time Olympia champ, and should he not be able to return to form, as he said, which is interesting because everybody got on my ass saying, well, if he can't return to what he used to look like, why would you bother? Basically, like, why wouldn't you go out? And he said the same thing. If he can't get back to where he was, then he'll hang him up. Again, what champion wouldn't? Why would you want to come back at 50%? Put yourself out there. And listen, I don't want to see that from not just Ramy. I don't want to see that with any champion. I didn't like seeing Ronnie. Everybody hangs around one show too long. You know, where you go, I just wish he would have. Yeah. You know, Lee Haney was the only smart one. Well, I shouldn't say that. Dorian Yates got out. He got out. He knew that was it, and then, he could see the future coming. He smartly stepped out. Lee Haney did it perfectly. He got out on top as the winner. See you later. That's why he's one of the greatest champions of all time.
Yeah, and left it, he won his 8th Olympia at what was it, 33 or something like that?
I think he was 31 or 2 or something like that. Yeah, I mean, that's younger. You think about this. Most guys aren't turning pro until they're in their mid-30s now.
Yeah.
That's another big difference, by the way. It's probably better for another show because we could talk about that for another hour or so. But, the average mean age over the years, if you were to graph it, back in the day, when the Sean Rays and other guys, Eddie Robinson, and, all these guys that were coming up, Richie Gaspari, you pretty much turned pro in your 20s, in your early 20s. If not for fate, I was almost there myself. I would have been, 22 or 23 if I would have, one more point or two back then at the USA's, and it's a different deal. But the average
so
age
close so many times.
Yeah, but the average age has gone from the low to mid 20s to the low to mid 30s. And there's a big difference there in physiques. That's why a lot of the physiques have changed over the years. This big never-ending argument that the physiques were better back then than they are now collectively, which I don't quite disagree with either. But there's a lot of reasons behind that. And that's one of them that nobody ever really talks about is the physiques were younger. And let's face it, this is a young man's sport. Into your 20s, again, into your 30s, that's prime time in bodybuilding.
Yeah, exactly. We've got a few more questions on the screen here now.
Bring them on.
This is from Richard Ratney. He says, is Bob doing the Masters Olympia or ever thought of it?
Yeah, I thought of it back in 2006 when I won it, and then I hung him up and said, thank you, good night, everybody. So I never had any intention of competing in my 40s. I targeted that show they changed it from the Masters Olympia to the Masters World Championships back then. And I targeted it mostly because we made a video out of it when I was with bodybuilding.com. So it was kind of a, farewell. I never really had any intention of competing into my 40s, and it took me so long to turn pro that, I made hay while the sun was shining. And I figured, you know what, let me just, I'll go for this title. We'll document it. And we did. We had a whole series on bodybuilding.com, called.
I watched the whole thing back then.
Okay, yeah.
Like that was when I was just first into bodybuilding. I was 15, 16, whatever I was. So yeah,
man, we got such great. That was so huge at the time. It was so popular that and it was real. I mean, the things we did, nothing was staged. I mean, everything that we did was pretty real. I mean, these guys were up my ass for 12 weeks, and a big hat off there to Travis Chapman and his crew for putting that on, and the War for the World, series that we did. And, it was a little combination lifestyle and it's kind of a throwback to the old, Road to the Olympia series like Mitsuru used to do way back in the old days. But it was literally more for the video, than the actual show. But as it turned out, of course, I got in decent shape and ended up was fortunate enough to win the show. And that was a great time to hang him up. Honestly, here's an interesting aside to that. So I wasn't really considering this, but when I won the show, it qualified me for the Olympia, which I didn't even realize at the time. That wasn't really my goal. It was just to win the show, of course, and go out on top. But Robin Chang, who was the director of the Olympia at the time, came up at some point after and said, hey, man, congratulations, champ. Nice job. So what do you want to do? And I go, well, what do you mean? And he goes, well, that just qualified you for the Olympia. So do you want to compete in the next Olympia or do you want to continue to host it? And I was like, oh, that's right. I didn't really, never dawned on me. And I was like, for a brief fleeting second there, brother, I thought to myself, how about if I announce myself, rip off the suit with Velcro and stuff, and I'll step out there, but thought that might be entertaining. Talk about entertainment, right? But,
yeah,
listen,
for sure.
To me, that was an easy call, just like we were talking about earlier. You got to know when to fold them, right? When to walk away and know when you're done. Don't let them take you out kicking and screaming. Go out on your own terms if you can. And to me, it was an easy call. It took me about 5 seconds or less to go, yeah, I'll keep the microphone. What was I going to do at 40 years old? Something deep inside me told me that I probably wasn't going to beat Ronnie Coleman. I don't know what it was, but something was there, bro.
Intuition.
It just said it's probably not going to happen, man. But
but you were good, Bob. Because you obviously didn't compete many times as a pro. How many times did you compete? It's only a couple, wasn't it?
Well, from years, I don't know the exact number of shows, but I hit the ground running. I mean, I knew I didn't have a lot of time, to make it happen. But so from 2001, I think the Toronto Pro was my debut. So 01 to 06.
Yep.
That's it.
Yeah. Oh, that's what I started following bodybuilding. I think it was like 04, so it was, I was probably.
No, you missed some of the primetime stuff, man. The 02 Night of the Champions, me and Marcus going toe to toe. I just saw Marcus actually at FIBO, so he still likes to rub in the fact that he beat me at the Night of the Champions. So that's okay though. But Beauty and the Beast, bro, they still talk about it.
Yeah, it was. I remember seeing the video of Marcus Rule from, I think it was that show, and it was like it was a way zoomed out one, and it sort of zooms in, and he just looks like something that's not real.
Well, that's of course he picks that show to be his all-time best. There was never a better Marcus Rule than that show. If he shows up like normal, then I would have kicked his ass right there. Been the Night of the Champions winner and going on to to the Olympia. But no, listen, he was tremendous, man. The guy was truly a beast. But yeah, he nailed it, man, on that show. He was just huge. But it was good, great competition.
I got a question for you about Marcus Rule, because Marcus Rule was one of these guys who was an absolute mass monster, and people didn't talk as much about, shot up body parts or symbol or anything like that as they do now, because we've obviously got online and it's more obvious. We've got more photos, we can see more, and we go, that's maybe not right. Now, Marcus Rule had crazy peaky biceps. I think there would have, regardless of what you think, there would have been speculation online, probably maybe his shoulders, things like that. Do you think Marcus Rule would have done better or worse in today's bodybuilding than he did back then?
I don't know. That's a real good question. Right now, I don't think it would serve him. I think the conditioning, his conditioning was always, up and down, which is why he didn't do as good as some people thought he would have at some shows. He had a ton of muscle, but, he was a little soft from behind, and overall, in the midsection was an issue. Right in today's, if he came out today with that physique, no, I don't think he would fare as well. It's just he did very well for back then. He fit in with the Nassers and the Dorians and those type of guys. But yeah, today, I mean, and you can see that. And again, it's not a trend or anything like that. We just happen to have some better physiques right now that are coming into play. This was a question I answered again on my last podcast. Everybody seems to think we have like these secret meetings or whatever that go on, like these. Oh, they're going in a different direction. I can assure you, people, there's no meeting. Okay, that goes on with Jim Mannion and Big Steve and myself and whoever. Right? There's no direction that's decided on, or these type of. You purely go by who's in front of you. Right now, we happen to have a few guys that have popped up, which I think is great, like Sampson, like Andrew Jack, like Regan Grimes. Like we've got some big boys out there who are put together really good, and they're a little more aesthetic. And they, even though they're big guys, they got the small waist, the X frame, all that. So it's just the way it rolls. I mean, listen, for a couple of years there, we didn't have pretty much any of those guys. So. It's just one of those things, all right? But the judges are always looking for the same exact thing. They want the best that represents each category. Size, shape, symmetry, proportion, muscularity, conditioning, right? That's what they're looking for. Sometimes it doesn't exist on stage. So you go with who fits the bill the best, right? Who's got the most boxes checked when you look at all those things. So a better physique naturally, okay, genetically, is always going to do better than somebody who's not as genetically gifted unless they didn't do their homework. All right, good example. All right, last year's Olympia, Samson Dauda, who looked great, was 6th place. Okay, now he's 6th because he's soft. Everything's there, right? He's beautiful muscle, great physique, beautiful symmetry and proportion, poses probably better than anybody on that stage that we have currently in the Olympia. But he was just soft enough that it took him down a few spots. If you notice, though, my friend, go look at the video footage. And in that first call out, he's towards the middle. Nobody, so everybody kind of forgot this, all right? He was being considered because when he first came out, you went, whoa, all right, let's take a look here, right? For their individuals, right now. And then when they got next to each other, you could see that he was, probably off by whatever, just pick a percentage, for conversation, 10 to 15%. Okay. So he starts getting moved out towards the 5th, 6th position, but he starts in the middle. All right. And now that was a first clue. If you're paying attention, if you're playing the on-home version of bodybuilding here of things to come. Nick came out and he was great. In condition, hard as a rock, veiny, he's grainy and muscular and all that stuff. And he was justly rewarded with a 3rd place. Now, go to the forward to the Arnold. Well, Samson comes in 15% sharper. And guess what? All those other attributes are still there. He actually has a better physique than Nick does. But in the absence of putting it all together, Samson's 90% was not better than Nick's 100% in that case. But at the Arnold, he did sharpen up, and it was enough that he's got better proportion, better shape, better symmetry, and he had enough conditioning. That's why he won.
Yeah, exactly. And I think as well, probably Nick Walker put him back 15 years ago, 20 years ago. I think people would be like, whoa, and he'd be up there, right up there. So, and he still is right up there regardless, but I think that he would, just be freaking people out like a Marcus Rule did. But Marcus Rule was obviously probably a little bit not as consistent with his conditioning as like a Nick Walker seems to be.
No,
but
well, Nick's got the 2 things that will always be popular in bodybuilding. I don't care how far in the future we go. He's got a shitload of muscle, and he gets in great conditioning. And those 2 things will take you a long way in the sport in the absence of. Again, you can be put together like a Greek god out there, but if you're butter soft, you're only going to play so high.
Well, you look at guys like Steve Laureus, who's not currently competing in the classic physique, because I don't know what he's doing right now. The most beautiful shape, tiny waist, big biceps, but just missed it by a little bit. And then, you got guys that are just working their ass off that tend to just push up, and overtake guys that may be genetically better.
Look at Bob Paris, right? We, take a step into yesteryear here. Like I say, you can always look at the past to see where the present's going. I don't think Bob Paris, I could be wrong on this, but I don't think so. But I don't think Bob Paris ever won a show in his career.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't think, again, somebody will correct us. That's okay. But I don't believe he ever won a show. Now, that's saying something because his name is always brought up. When you talk about the great bodybuilders of yesterday and, they had better physiques. They were put together and they were purporting beautiful physiques like Bob Paris. This guy is brought up. Listen, for the most part, he was always in 4th or 5th, throughout his career. If he took a runner-up, maybe it was one show, but I don't think he ever won. And he was never a serious contender for the Olympia. How can that be with that beautiful physique? And the answer is, well, he never quite got that conditioning. And listen, I know all about that shit because it's lack of conditioning that kept me out of the winner's circle and then thus out of the pros for years. Matt Mendenhall, one of the greatest physiques of all time. I don't care, that he never made it to the pros. That's what kept him out of the pros. Edgar Fletcher. There's a whole bunch of names. Rory Liedlmeyer. These were guys that were fantastic that people look at today. You see these things on these websites, classic bodybuilding, and they go, hey, this guy would kick half the pros' asses today. Never even turned pro. It's like, well, that's true, but you have to have it all. You can't just have a nice X-frame and a beautiful physique and all that. That's a part of the sport, but all those things come into play.
And I think a lot of it with the way the physiques go, like we're seeing more aesthetics guys now doing well, just because there's more aesthetics guys aesthetic guys that are big enough and they're good enough and then they're being rewarded. So I think the good thing is, though,
Correct.
it puts more emphasis on aesthetics and having a smaller waist.
Yeah.
Maybe, upping your game with the posing. We see that in classic physique, even though it's not judged there. The posing routine specifically, there is more emphasis on it because all the other guys around them are raising their game. So I like that, and people still think it plays more of a factor in the classic than the open, but it's more of a
That'll help our
perception thing.
sport. That'll help our sport tremendously because you listen. I've done interviews with every bodybuilder there is on this planet that I could get a hold of to doing, and everyone I ask the same question, like Ronnie or any of these guys. I says, Ronnie, if I were to line up all 8 Ronnie Colemans on stage from all your 8 of your Olympia wins, who wins? And he says 1998, without hesitation. 1998 is his favorite, beats every other Ronnie Coleman out there. And every bodybuilder I've ever asked that pretty much has the same response.
2003.
And it's always the lighter version, right?
Oh, yeah.
Listen, Phil Heath. If you got to pick a Phil Heath, which one do you pick? 2011,
I think his
2012?
first Olympia, 2011.
Yeah. You see what I mean? Now, what's the common denominator here? Chances are he was probably his lightest in his first Olympia, right? And as he gets bigger throughout, he's still great. He's still a great champ and a 7-time champ at that. But is it a better physique? And you go, well, I kind of like that physique. Ronnie, well, I kind of like the lighter physique. I've talked to national champions. Well, I kind of like what I looked like when I was an amateur. Again, what's the common denominator here? One, they were lighter. Whether that was because they had to make a class back then, they got to make the light heavies, they had to be under a certain weight or whatever. 2, they were younger back then. The physique does change as you get older. And like we just talked about earlier, mean average age has gone up over the years. So you'll see a pro come in, but he's already in his late 30s. And all of a sudden, a couple of years later, you're like, well, he looked better a couple of years ago. Listen, as you get into your 40s, the waist gets wider. Now you've been training for 20, 30 years, okay? The legs get a little thinner. All of a sudden, there's a little less sweep on the legs. The arms get a little thin. That's why Masters competitors look different than open competitors. You go to any show, I don't care, locally, whatever, you can tell a Masters guy from a regular guy in the open all day long. Because, again, they've got those features that are just a little, the chest is a little bit flatter. Again, there's not things aren't popping as much as, the younger guys, that type of look. But that's what we have at the pro level. And that's why everybody picks the lighter weight. So this is going to help us having more aesthetic guys, because hopefully guys will keep it a little bit lighter when they're on stage. They don't need to get that big. And literally the only thing that gets bigger is the waist, really.
Yeah, of course. And obviously the way the judging goes as well, if it varies, the judging evolves over time, at least to some degree. It's not exactly the same as it was 40 years ago. So I think that is an evolving thing, but I don't think it's changing as dramatically. Like, well, we want aesthetics guys now just because...
No, the judging doesn't change. The physiques do. The judging, again, is always the same. They're always looking for that perfect specimen out there. But, again, most of the time it doesn't exist. So, or if you've got 5 blocky guys out there, who's going to win? A blocky guy, right? I mean, you can only judge on what's in front of you.
And it's always that combination as well. And fans sometimes, I think, do forget that. Everyone forgets that. Someone's left a super chat, so we'll get to that in a second. Oh, he just gives a shout out. Good stream, bro. So obviously people are enjoying it. But it circles back to that whole thing. I used to see that photo of, I think it was Marcus Rule standing next to Jay Cutler. And it was one of those post-Olympia shows. And people say, well, if they want mass, why doesn't Marcus Rule win? Well, you're not taking into perspective all aspects and all sides of a physique. Turn to the back, and you might have Jay or Ronnie completely dominating Marcus. And they're not looking at the full picture and not looking at the fact that maybe the shoulders or biceps look a little bit funny or they just don't flow as well. So it really is one of those things that I think.
Well, this is one of the biggest this is one of the biggest misconceptions in the industry is, and I just did oddly enough, I just did another podcast on this called, What's a Freak? Because we hear this term thrown around very loosely these days, all right? So you got Samson Dauda, right? Who, despite being 6 foot plus and 300 pounds, isn't considered a freak because he's got a nice looking physique, right? Then you got Nick Walker, who is considered a freak. All right. So you go, and then you got Andrew Jack in third, who's again, despite being 6'2" and almost 300 pounds, he's not considered a freak because he's aesthetic, right? So let's just take those 3 guys, right? And then you got Ramy. He's a freak, okay, for obvious reason. Yeah. So they say, well, wait a minute, I don't understand. If Samson wins, then why isn't Andrew Jack second? The judges are all over the place. And it's like, well, no, because there's other elements that come into play. It's not that cut and dry. They're not looking for, like you just said, a certain direction. Okay, that's not part of the criteria. So how does a non-freak beat a freak, and then the freak beats the aesthetic guy, and the aesthetic guy beats this other freak? No, the judges aren't all over the place. It's a means to an end. Okay, they got to take all factors. So, could I have had Andrew Jackson second? Possibly. He faded out pretty good at the night show, and Nick didn't. So, but listen, Nick's not, they make it sound like this guy's a fire hydrant, for God's sake. So, like, he's not, this kid isn't put together that badly, right? I mean,
No.
He's a damn good competitor, right? He's a good pro.
Yeah.
So that only goes so far. But by the same token, like Samson at the Olympia, well, smoothness only goes so far. If you're butter soft, you're going to be in dead last. I don't care how well put together you are. Okay, so there's always the means to the end there. You got to get to the middle ground of overall who's better. And in this case, they felt it was Samson. Just using this as our example, and they thought Nick overall was best in second place. That he had, enough of everything, that he was the second best bodybuilder there, all things considered, and so on and so forth. But yeah, make no mistake, people. There is no direction. There is no one thing. And thank God for that, because it would be a pretty poor sport if all you had was just one physique that would win. That's it. And everybody else, forget about it. You might as well just not even compete. So thank God we don't have that system.
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally agreed with the Arnold placings too, because this is why I would like to see at least one judge, a head judge, whatever, a video be recorded of them after the show explaining at least why they judged it a certain way, or just a few little clips of them talking, or something where we have more clarity, so the fans aren't going, oh, the judges are all over the place, they don't know what they're talking about. They can say, the reason Andrew Jack, I'm just saying why I think personally, the reason why Andrew Jack placed third was, while he was hard of the Olympia and overall he was a bit better, perhaps he was a little bit stringy and he needs that time to fill out and bring the fullness plus the conditioning to the stage. That's what I'm assuming it was.
And you're still going to get a judge's opinion. There's a reason we use multiple judges. There's a reason at big shows we use 11 or 13 of them. Okay, and that's because it's the general consensus of the scoring. I'll guarantee you there was judges there who had Nick in first, and there might have been one who had Andrew Jackson first. I don't know. I didn't see the scoring before they took out the highs and the lows. But there's the reason why you add all these things together, and it's a general consensus, because everybody has an opinion. You can go talk to a judge and he goes, I had Nick winning all day long. Now, is he lying? No. That's just who he happened to like, and maybe he favors a physique like that. There's still, individual interpretation that goes on here. Bodybuilding is not an exact science, okay? It's like looking at a piece of art on the wall. Well, listen, you can have a Picasso right next to, something that's modern, and some people think that Picasso is the greatest thing they've ever seen, and I think it's something my bulldog could have done in the backyard. So, you know what I mean? It's purely up to interpretation. So,
yeah. And that's what I love about bodybuilding. We have, more judges at the Olympia and stuff as well, which I think is warranted. And, I think you even said 2 highs and 2 lows get thrown out at the Arnold and the Olympia. So 3
highs,
wow,
and 3 lows.
There you go. Which makes it rules out, unless we're all corroborating together, it rules out any
good luck,
funny sort of judging. Yeah, exactly. So,
we do everything we can to ensure the integrity of the judging process, and still people cry foul as if there's some sort of conspiracy and how would this even work? Like, I don't mean in terms of somebody's getting paid off I'll tell you what, if you're an athlete stupid enough to give some judge money thinking it's going to get you somewhere, a fool and his money is soon parted, because his score is going to get thrown out anyways. So if everybody else had you in 5th and this jackass puts you in 1st, his score is going to get thrown out. It's one of the lows. Yeah. So it ain't going to work, folks. It doesn't work like that. It's as fair as it's going to get, and it's just open for interpretation.
And you know what it could be?
It could be that the other guy was just better. How about that?
Possible, but they never seem to think
I know that's freaky. You could chew on that one, but it's possible.
Bob, I want to thank you so much for coming on here, and thank you for everyone who joined in the live, and apologies for the mess up at the start, and for people who watch on replay, and I think a few hours will take for it to properly filter through. That will be cut out of the show. So if you do want to wait a couple of hours,
fix this in post, bro, please.
Yes, I will. I will absolutely and cut all that bit out. But Bob, thank you so much for coming on once again. Do you have anything you want to promote? Obviously, a Voice of Bodybuilding podcast as well.
Yeah, the VOB podcast is alive and well. Sorry I don't get out as much as some of the other podcasters, but I'm actually on the road, everybody. Like I'll be on the road this week. I'll be in Vancouver, British Columbia. Got a pro show up there. You guys can check that out. And then it's the season's moving on, man. I'll be in Pittsburgh. I'll probably be in New York. All the main shows, Chicago, Tampa, and all those. So I'm going to try to get to as many lives like we were able to get the Ramy thing. I finally got we got this funky new Bluetooth microphone type thing. So hopefully it's going to work a lot better.
I was going to suggest
I know, right? Let me tell you, it is so difficult. You probably know this, but a lot of others don't. It is so difficult in a loud environment like an expo to hear anything. And that's with a shotgun mic. But it just picks up all the ambient noise and you can't hear anything. So we filtered it out. We tried to fix it in post as much as we could because Ramy speaks very low anyways. So it's very difficult to understand. You know, me, you don't have any problem hearing. I've got a big mouth. So, so we picked up this new piece. So hopefully that's going to help out a little bit when we're on the road. But please subscribe, everybody. Appreciate it. And thanks for having me on again, brother. And as for companies, Redcon One, as always, got the representing the shirt there. My good friends over there, we're constantly making improvements. Got a new backdrop coming in for the VOB and all that stuff. And of course, my good friends at Nada. These guys are absolutely fantastic. And if anybody's watching this and you need some equipment, hit me up. I will set you up with the guys and we'll get you some new equipment. Hope you got a shitload of money because it's not cheap.
But like you said, it's a Ferrari of equipment. So I'd love to talk to you about Bernardo too. I'd love to talk to them.
It ain't cheap, but you know what? You get what you pay for, man. So absolutely.
Does the owner speak English well?
I tell you what, Rudy's a fixture, and when I first met him, he does speak some English. His son Eduardo, who's a very prominent part of the company, speaks better English, but it's far better than my Italian. So I've been kind of brushing up on that. And but Rudy's a fixture, man. I mean, this guy, 72 years old, and when I met him, I was looking at him and I'm thinking I've seen this guy before. Like, I mean, I recognize the name, the equipment brand, but I'm like, where have I seen him? Well, sure enough, I get home and I've got a decent collection of old, bodybuilding mags and memorabilia. And I flip back and sure enough, I whipped out like a 1993 or 94 Muscle and Fitness. And I shoot to the Olympia and there's Rudy on stage holding somebody's hand up with Joe Weider on the other side and his name on the stage. He sponsored the Olympia for like 3-4 years in a row, 5 years back then. So, but he's been around literally since the 70s designing equipment. And like I say, talk about a historian of the sport. I love these guys because unfortunately we don't have a lot of them left. And I could sit here and just listen to his stories all day long about the old days and, Sergio and Arnold and he was around for like a lot of it. So it's really cool to talk to him. And for any of us that really enjoy the history of the sport, and I tell you, these guys are precious.
That's why I was even thinking, like, if they spoke well enough English, it'd be cool to have them on either your podcast, my podcast, or all of these on here or whatever.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not that good, but
good enough,
yeah, it would make for a good interview. But maybe I'm trying to think of something I can do especially with Rudy down the road, where maybe it just gets subtitled with English or something like that. Because really, the stuff he's saying, I mean, he's got some command of the English, but not good enough for that. But the stories are
bro, on YouTube now they do transcripts, so you could probably copy and paste the transcript from Italian, put it into English, and make sure someone maybe Italian checks over it. So there's nothing that it got wrong. But the AI technology now,
yeah, sure, man. I mean, but anything that we can capture these guys. Again, he's 72 and he's as spry as a fox. But these guys ain't getting any younger, so it's always a pleasure for me to talk to them and just again hear the old beginning tales of the old Weider stories and all that. There's some crazy shit that went on back then, man.
So, for sure. That'd be cool to hear for sure. Now I want to give a shout out to XJames14X says, I feel the sport is going more towards hardness, conditioning and shape, hashtag Samson Dowder, but Nick, Hardy and Andrea are crazy for the next few years. Ian Ian isn't done. Matt Jansen is the new Harney. So he's got some opinions there. Not really a
Okay.
question, but
Yeah.
yeah, shout out to him for supporting the show. And then Lee Priest says, bye Bob, look forward to our show. Lol. I think Lee would definitely do it actually, to be honest. And I think it would actually be pretty damn cool, like in all seriousness.
I get
And
some
then
serious clicks on that one. Yeah, absolutely.
Ronald saying Bob has excellent communication skills, well spoken.
Appreciate that.
Uh,
Thank you.
yeah, and people appreciating the stream. So yeah, people loving it. And
I
then yeah,
hope
someone
it's I know we have some fun here, but I hope some of it's educational. We get talking a
yeah.
little bit about training and stuff, but people, I mean, please listen to what I'm telling you. It's coming from experience, and I want nothing but the best for people. But when I'm telling you, like, this exercise sucks, or don't do this, or focus on that, or whatever, take it to the bank. I mean, I have nothing to gain or lose, But the one thing we got is with experience is you got hopefully some wisdom that comes with it, and you can at least put this off to the next generation. But trust us, folks. We grew up with the old stuff, so anything that you can do to further your career, to stay injury free, to stay in the gym, or if you're a competitive bodybuilder, again, all that voodoo stuff we always talk about, getting ready for shows, don't do any of it. Trust me, it's all going nowhere. So been
Yeah,
there, done that.
things come in ebbs and flows, and I think a lot of you guys that have been there and done that have seen sort of things come through the industry, and sometimes things stick, but then sometimes things just flow through in terms of whether it's training stuff, gear
Most of it
stuff,
all comes
peptides,
back to the
whatever.
basics, bro.
Yeah,
It all
exactly.
comes full circle. You end up where you began.
Mm, exactly. So, Bob, I want to thank you so much once again. There is a link to your interview with Phil Heath, which I took some content from and
Oh,
repurposed
good.
it and highlighted on some of my videos and sent people your way. So the link to that is in the description below, and people can just go there, subscribe to your channel, Voice of
Very cool.
Bodybuilding on YouTube, and obviously follow you on all social media and stuff like that as well. So thanks once again, Bob Cicherillo, the MC of a Mr. Olympia, IFBB Pro, and a man of many talents. For myself, Xavier Wills, and Bob Cicherillo, we are